Good morning, everybody. Dobre utro. It wasn't that funny. Before we start, I should just say, if you need the presentations, the questions, the comments could be in Russian or English. So if you need a translation headset, there are translation headsets outside. And if you want that translated into Russian, then you need a translation headset already. So I don't know what else to say, really. But otherwise, welcome to Automotive Logistics Russia 2016. My name is Louis Yakumi. I'm the publisher of the Automotive Logistics Group, who are the publishers of Automotive Logistics and Finished Vehicle Logistics magazines, and the organizer of the Automotive Logistics Global Conferences that are held in Mexico, Europe, China, the USA, United Kingdom, India, Brazil, and of course it's great to be back in Russia, in beautiful Moscow. But there can be no denying that it's a tough time here in Russia, including, perhaps especially for the automotive industry. But as always, the Russians stay strong. They look for solutions, for new ways to survive and to prosper. And those solutions can be perhaps summed up in the three words at the beginning of our theme for this year: localize, export, and adapt. Those are the ways that the automotive industry can survive and be ready for the future. And you have to prepare for any future. We've shown in the UK in the last week with the Brexit that anything can happen in politics or economics that can change things overnight. Today you will hear from what is being done in Russia, from government initiatives to the car maker solutions and part suppliers, and of course the logistics service providers themselves. And talking of logistics service providers, I'd like to thank our sponsors for supporting us and keeping the faith in the automotive industry in Russia. Our global sponsors: Beijing Changzhou CDC Logistics, CTM Law, CHEP, GEFCO, and Wallenius Wilhelmsen Logistics, and our silver sponsors: Adampol Vectura, Finlines, RTL, and TMBC. Automotive Logistics Russia is also part of the Automotive Logistics Live program, which is hosted by CTM Law. This means that the conference is being streamed live across the world, but also that you can use the app to ask questions and to make comments to the whole audience. You can even send direct messages to other attendees. To use this service, you can see the instructions on the screen or on the inside back cover of the printed program. You can see more information. We'll also be using this for some voting surveys in the last session of the conference, so please log in and join the live experience. But most importantly is what you do in the room. Russia has always been an interactive conference with questions from the room, so I hope that will continue. We have a very full day, so don't plan on leaving early. The first session will give us some high-level industry information. The second session tells us more directly what the players in the industry are actually doing, the car makers and logistics service providers. Session 3 is our famous automotive logistics think tanks. And session 4 is the high-level question and answer session. One of the things we won't be discussing today will be football. It seemed there was a competition between Russia and England to see who has the worst football teams. But I think after losing to Iceland, I think we can say England has probably got the worst football team at the moment. But it is an important time for the automotive logistics industry in Russia. So please listen to the presentations, meet the sponsors, ask questions during the sessions, and hopefully enjoy the conference, enjoy the full day. And of course, we'll be finishing the end of the day or the evening with a wonderful dinner where I hope you will all join us for some even more networking and discussions. You will also find on the tables evaluation forms. These are very important to us and hopefully to you. Before you leave, you don't have to fill them in now, unless you think it's been fantastic so far, in which case fill them in now in case it gets worse. But they're very important, so please complete them, share your information, what we can do to make the Automotive Logistics Russia conference, your conference, as good, as important, and as beneficial to you as your industry deserves it to be. There will be a prize draw at the end, which will be a gift of the Queen of England's favourite biscuits. So please complete these evaluation forms, mostly because the information is very important. But if those biscuits are good enough for the Queen, then I'm sure you will enjoy them too. But now the first session. The first session, as we said, is to share some information what the opportunities are, what government initiatives, what's being done to support some of the things that can help the industry move forward. So we've got some industry experts and very connected experts to share some of their views. So I'd like to welcome the first speaker of the day, the first speaker of Automotive Logistics Russia 2016, Tatiana Hristova, the manager for Central and Eastern Europe and European Light Vehicle Solution Forecast for IHS Automotive. Thank you, Tatiana.
Thank you, Louis, for your introduction, and I'm really glad to open our today's conference. My charts will be in English, but I'm going to present in Russian, and I'm going to switch to Russian right now. Добрый день, дамы и господа, мы находимся.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Since we're in Russia, as one of the Russian ministers mentioned once, being in Russia, let's talk Russian. My name is Tatiana Hristova. I represent IHS Automotive, the company that is dealing mainly with forecasts for different automotive markets. So everything I'm going to speak about today is not just an analysis of the past and the modern day, but is more oriented on the future trends. I will show you some figures that we expect to have in the future, export figures, sales figures, etc. So I suggest you look at our forecast for the Russian market of light vehicle sales development. Then we'll discuss global logistics concepts in automotive production. And on the basis of conclusions from these two parts, I will show you two scenarios of the possible development of Russian exports, automotive exports from Russia. Before we start, it should be mentioned that when I speak about the automotive market, I mean up to 6 tons vehicles market, both light vehicles and light commercial vehicles. At some point of time, not so long ago, the Russian market showed quite good results. In 2008, 2013, the market practically achieved 3 million units, and these 3 million units sold was a key index for the whole Russian market. That's the figure that was actually part of many business plans and part of many investment plans, and the companies that have come to Russia for a long time have brought very big investments with them, and they were taking into account these 3 million units of vehicles as an average index for the near future. And several years ago, the forecasts for the automotive market's growth was up to not only 4 million, but up to 6 million units. Unfortunately, the Russian market is not growing or developing. It shows a different trend, an opposite trend as of lately. After 1.6 million units sold last year, this year we expect only 1.4 million units to be sold, which is less than a half from what was planned by many companies. The 3 million units figure is not unreal for the Russian market. It is quite achievable. The question is when. We say that, unfortunately, in 10 years, 2026, 2027, seems to us to be a plausible time when we'll reach this 3 million units again. What is happening to the Russian automotive market as of now, and what can be a turning point to change this negative trend on the market? On the whole, to analyze the Russian market is not that difficult right now. In the economics, the term of the perfect storm is used as a description of everything that is going on in the Russian economics. This perfect storm means that practically everything bad that could happen with one country did happen in Russia as of lately, starting from decrease of prices for energy carriers, which is one of the main factors for the Russian economics, carrying on with the structural changes in the foreign exchange market regulations, different reforms, ambiguous reforms, and the sanctions, short-term sanctions. In the short-term period, the sanctions certainly increase the liquidity crisis in the Russian economics. The situation of the perfect storm in itself is not new, is not unique for Russia. There are many countries in the world that suffer from the same manifestations in the global economics and the internal processes. But the uniqueness in Russia is that, as of lately, we've always seen certain events that could not be predicted. Neither the story with Crimea or Turkey or with Egypt could have been predicted, even by the people using crystal balls or people who base their forecasts on some visions. So when we forecast the Russian market, it is very important to take into account the instability factor or volatile factor that can't be predicted beforehand or even 2-3 months in advance. The economic changes can be forecasted 6 to 12 months before they happen. In terms of geopolitical factors, it is very difficult to do this. When there will be changes on the Russian market, it should be mentioned that several months ago, there was a certain trend, or not very trend, but positive changes happened on the Russian market. The rates of dropping down were slowed, and many people hoped that the Russian automotive market was starting to restore and recover. Unfortunately, we never looked at this initial trend as a stable one. There were not enough either economic or geopolitical prerequisites for this. In accordance with our forecast, the market will start to recover only in the second half of 2017. And this will be the result of stabilization and the increase of price for energy carriers, stabilization of their consumer expectations. We expect that the population of Russia will adapt to new conditions, to new prices, to new currency exchange rates, and as a result of this, we'll start consuming more on the whole. And on the other side, the exchange of vehicles in the second half of 2017 will certainly support the sales on the Russian automotive market. We also expect a very slow growth in 2017, around 8.5%, and by 2018, a higher gain. Certainly, this is connected very much with the price for oil. $80 or $100 per barrel, which are critical for the forecast of the Russian market. We expect that $8 per barrel may be expected only by 2015, while $100 per barrel not earlier than 2025, which means that sooner or later the market will be stabilized. As of now, we have this gap, practically in 10 years gap. And for those who have come with investments to Russia, those who have already invested or are thinking about investing, the question is what's to be done in the course of these 10 years, how to survive, which strategies are to be used to survive or even to improve their position on the market. Some interesting facts more. It is very interesting to look at the development of the local sourcing, not only what is being sold in Russia, but what is being produced in Russia as well. In 2015, we've seen a significant jump, 8% jump compared to the previous year. So 8% more vehicles were sold in Russia and produced in Russia at the same time. It may be explained on the one hand by the fact that the population paid more attention to cheaper vehicles that are mainly produced in Russia. On the other hand, it is a result of the incentive programs for the market. And the third factor is that, which is no less important, that the prices for vehicles produced in Russia grew to a lesser extent compared to imported cars on the background of the localization, on the background of the fact that localization of the vehicles produced in Russia is quite low. If we look at the automotive production in Russia, we may see that compared to 2012, when the production only started growing, the local production in Russia, I mean, now in 2016, we expect only 1,200,000 vehicles produced in Russia, almost half compared to 2012. The production will grow following the sales of vehicles in Russia, and we're going to discuss, I'm sure, today different supporting programs for the automotive production in Russia. And now let's discuss how to survive this 10 years gap and how the companies are trying to adapt their business. Practically all the companies, and we're speaking about OEMs here, and suppliers, tier 1 and tier 2 suppliers of automotive parts, they use very similar strategies. The first step they do, they focus on optimizing of processes, product lines, then minimization of costs, first and foremost, and very often people suffer because they are being dismissed. Next step that demands more investments is the export of both vehicles and parts from Russia. And as a final point, the companies come to revision of strategies. And there are several ways for this. Some companies choose leaving the market strategy. We know the sad experience of General Motors in Russia. Some people decide to wait and see. And here, I always think about fear that for the last 5 or 6 years, waiting for better times to organize the local assembly in Russia. As of now, these plans are not to be implemented. It is impossible to implement them. And last way is the market share increase on the market, and Hyundai and Kia are the definite leaders. In this way, they show very good example as of lately with a very aggressive strategy of promotion on the Russian market that will certainly bring its fruit in the future. Let's talk about export. In order to discuss export from Russia, we have to understand the place of Russia in the global logistics processes. For me, this is extremely important. Very often when the companies develop the strategy of export, they look from inside. thinking about what they want to do as a company. We usually look at global processes, not from inside, but from the outside, from the point of view of the possibilities of the countries. So what I'm going to show you now is not the result of my own analysis or my team analysis, but the result of the work of our whole company. We have analytics all over the world who analyze the opportunities of sales and production of vehicles in various cars all over the world, looking at the internal demand, internal advantages, local regulations of the market.
So basically, we're trying to look at it from a different perspective. We're trying to look at it from the consumer's perspective, from the demand's perspective. We're trying to see whether the external markets are ready to accept what is made in other countries. So let us start from the evolution of global logistics or logistic concepts. Well, traditionally, I have to say that the automotive production centers used to be located where the cars were manufactured, where the vehicles were manufactured. So here you see the ratio of cars which were manufactured in different regions. As you can see here, we had traditional car manufacturing centers such as Japan, Western Europe, North America. Traditionally or initially, that's where most vehicles were made. Following that, or a bit later, the production centers shifted to other countries where OEMs saw more potential. So here we have emerging markets or markets which have significant future potential. So here we see an increase in car manufacturing in China. China is one of the leaders now. We also saw a lot of investors come to Russia at that point in time. We saw a surge in production in South America. So basically, this is a second concept, which was targeting sales markets. What we see today, though, it's slightly different, and this is probably here to stay for the next decade or so. So we see the cost-cutting concept. So OEMs want to make cars where it is feasible in terms of cutting the costs. And so when it comes to transportation of vehicle from the place of manufacturing to the place of sales, to the sales market, well, it basically, the weight of logistics is decreasing. The OEMs are looking at the countries where they can cut the costs, especially when it comes to the costs for components, labor costs, energy costs. It is very important. It is a very important point for all of us to understand advantages of Russia as a country which manufactures cars and automotive components. So which kind of countries now have an advantage? Well, of course, first and foremost, it is China. It will also continue to grow in China. New manufacturing sites. We're talking about South Asia, Vietnam, the Philippines. So these are the countries which are also being viewed as future production markets, future automotive export markets. To a lesser extent, but we also see growth there. To a lesser extent, it is South America and Africa, as well as the Middle East. I would like to emphasize yet again that the level of global automotive logistics development is so high, it is so sophisticated that we do not have any sort of issues when it comes to vehicle transportation. You will see on this slide that a lot of cars are being moved between the regions, between different markets. As you can see, at present, the largest automotive exporter is Japan and South Korea. More than 7 million vehicles are being manufactured in that region and are being exported elsewhere. This much smaller share is being sold on the local markets. The next leader is Europe. About 4.5 million cars are being exported from Europe to different markets. North America, well, it is not a very significant export region. A lot of the cars made in North America are being sold on the local market, but still we're talking about 2.5 million vehicles that are being exported from North America. And future production hub is South Asia. Currently, we're talking about 2.5 million cars that are being exported, but we are expecting significant growth. China and Africa, well, for now, we see a small number of cars being exported. A lot of the cars that are made in China are being sold in China. So therefore, about 19 million cars, we're talking about 19 million cars, which on average are transported between different regions. If we go down one level, this is something that I couldn't really show on the previous slide, but we're talking about 33 million cars that are exported each year on average, and this is about 1/3 from the global production of cars. So we're talking about 30% of all vehicles that are being exported. And I think in this regard, Europe is quite interesting. If we're talking about 30% of cars being exported globally, then about 50% of cars are being exported from Europe. And here, of course, Germany leads the way. Compared to last year, when about 140,000 cars were exported out of Russia, well, this year we're talking about a significant decrease, about 80,000 cars which will be exported from Russia this year. And here, again, we probably shouldn't calculate the share of cars being exported from Russia in the global figure of exports. So the share of Russian vehicle export is very insignificant. So Russia has a rather small place in the global manufacturing of vehicles. What is interesting here, especially for those of you who take an interest in statistics, you probably see a bit of a discrepancy in the statistics compared to the figures we saw last year. But we are usually looking only at the cars which were exported and sold. The cars which were just exported to other countries but were not sold, well, we did not take them into account since they didn't really contribute anything to the added value, and they didn't lead to an increase in the overall automotive market. So the cars which remained in dealers' warehouses were not taken into account by us when we were doing the calculations of the global export figures. So let's continue to talk about Russia's role in the global automotive export and in global automotive logistics. So let's talk about the strengths and the weaknesses. Well, I probably cannot give you the answer whether it is feasible to export automobiles from Russia. Sure, we can talk about a lot of challenges faced by Russian OEMs and foreign OEMs in Russia. So let's start from the bottom here. If we're talking about international OEMs or foreign brand cars that are made in Russia, well, we have to take into account the fact that all of the global markets at present basically we see that the demand is completely supplied by production. We do not see any countries in the world which would suffer from a shortage of vehicles. So we have to say that each country or each manufacturing location wants to keep their share, and nobody is going to help Russia just because Russia is going through difficult times. So there is no need to revise logistics concept. It is a very important point when we talk about export figures from Russia. So before an OEM makes a decision that they need to revise their transportation concept, and before they start considering taking cars not from Germany but exporting them from Russia, well, basically they need to have a very valid reasons for that. So when it comes down to developing new logistic routes, well, we have to say that here OEMs encounter a lot of transportation logistics issues. It takes into account that the global logistics network is highly developed, while in Russia we're still saying that the Russian automotive logistics is underdeveloped. If we talk in Russia, we have to admit that basically sales networks, the level of service and the level of training of the personnel are lacking in quality. The last thing that I wanted to talk about is that we have quite a lot of negative perception when it comes down to things that are made in Russia. Consumers expect a lot of challenges when it comes to quality, to the development, to the technological development of the car manufacturing process. And although a lot of the Russian brands have improved their image and have worked on their quality, we have to say that when it comes down to Western Europe, I think time needs to pass so that the consumers will change their attitude towards things made in Russia. At the same time, I see quite a lot of positive things, a lot of strength when it comes to export of Russian cars. First of all, we have quite a wide range of things that are made in Russia, of vehicles that are made in Russia. At the same time, I have to say that there are a lot of crossovers, there are a lot of SUVs, increased tank size. And I have to say that for many regions and for many countries, these things would be an advantage when it comes to automotive exports. What is the most important when we talk about advantages is advantages from currency depreciation. Although it is something that we as consumers find rather sad, but currency depreciation is something that actually spurs the development for OEMs. On this slide, you see the RPI index and cost-saving development graph. This is a relative, how do I call it in Russian, relative cost-saving index. So this is a rather complicated compound index, which is calculated taking into account Russian currency, national currency depreciation, the growth of salaries in the automotive industry. What we also take into account when calculating this index, we are talking about the increase of local content, and we view all of this compared to the Rostov costs of car manufacturing in Western Europe. So you see this index is marked in gray, but what's more interesting is the blue line, is relative cost saving in Europe per vehicle. So you see how much money can be saved when a car is made in Russia compared to the same car being made in Western Europe. So what this index shows us is that in the next 5 years, Russian manufacturing will have a significant competitive advantage due to the economic situation in the country, which will remain in the near future. So the savings per car would be about until 2022 or 2025. So we're talking about savings of about 250 euros per vehicle. And this is probably the most interesting slide from my presentation. This is Russian light vehicle exports. We expect quite a stable growth of exports of light vehicles from Russia, so about 340,000 cars will be exported from Russia by 2029. I think this is a good figure, but the Russian government is expecting to see even higher figures. So let's look at the structure of export. Where will these vehicles be exported to? Unfortunately, a lot of our analysts who analyze the countries of Central and Western Europe, they see a rather modest prospects when it comes to export of vehicles from Russia to other countries. So they believe, to Western countries, they believe that a lot of cars will be exported to Eastern Europe, like Kazakhstan and Belarus. Not a lot of cars will be exported to Middle East and Africa. And we do not see any export opportunities to North America and South Asia, despite the fact that a lot of the Russian experts are considering such countries as Vietnam. This is something that we see in the short-term perspective, but we do believe that the South Asian countries are interested in the development of their own production sites. I also looked at the optimistic scenario. If everything goes our way, how many cars can be exported out of Russia? Well, even if we look at the optimistic scenario, even in this case, South Asia is not a potential export market. But we believe that in the optimistic scenario, we can see an increase of exports to South America, Middle East, and Africa, due to the increase in dealer networks. The increase for Western Europe and Central Europe, we see about 40,000 vehicles to such countries as Germany, Italy, and France. So this is not a very significant number, as you can see. Quite unexpected results we got looking at Eastern Europe. Even if the situation is extremely favorable for the Russian economy, we see that the export of vehicles to Eastern Europe will not be increased. First of all, traditional exporters such as Kazakhstan and Belarus, they have a certain growth threshold. And these countries, especially Kazakhstan, are interested in developing their own production. So the development of internal production is an important thing, despite the fact that Russian OEMs are looking to export. I believe that the setup of local production in other countries is probably a more promising development. A lot of countries have quite high entrance barriers, and so we have such countries as North America, with average import tariff is about 35%. In the Middle East, in Iran, we have the tariffs up to 90%. So it is very promising to set up production there. And to conclude, I would like to mention South Asian countries which are interested in developing their own production. This is also one of the reasons why tariffs are so high in these regions, and that is why exporting to these countries is not very promising, whereas we can talk about setting up production, also production of traditional Russian brands. So this is probably all from me, so let me just give you several takeaways. Export from Russia is quite an interesting business direction, but there are no countries where we are awaited eagerly, so that's why we have to invest a lot into exports. We have to increase organizational and financial flows, so I'd be happy to answer your questions.
Thank you very much, Tatiana. Very good opening presentation. Realistic, honest, but a little bit of positivity, something to look forward to. Unfortunately, not for today, but in the near future and definitely for a few years' time. Now to hear more about some of the regulations and what can be done to help you with exporting and to, again, support the survival and growth of the Russian automotive market, I'd like to welcome Ksenia Sizova, an associate from DLA Piper. Thank you.
Gentlemen, доброе утро, дамы и господа.
I represent DLA Piper, the international law firm, and I would like to provide a review of current trends of import replacement policy that is being implemented in the Russian Federation as of now. So I will start with the things many of you know. At the end of 2014, the Russian Federation has actively started the implementation of import replacement policy, the introduction of sanctions on import bans from some European and countries, and the US stimulated this. So two main documents were adopted that became the basis of this policy. Visually, the federal law number 488 on the industrial policy, and also the decree of the government on the import substitution policy. In 2015, the statutory basis was well developed, and the whole series of governmental decrees were adopted. I will tell you more about them a bit later. On the whole, we may say that the import replacement policy may be drawn down to two main principles. First, the bans and restrictions on the commodities of foreign origin when carrying out state procurement, and support of the local production in the form of different incentives, being governmental subsidies and tax preferences and other measures of support, including the new mechanism that became very interesting as of lately, the so-called special investment contracts, and I will tell you about it more a bit later. So the Ministry of Trade and Industry has selected the main priority industries. They were selected on the basis of how much the industry depends on the import. As you see from this slide, the main 20 industries. For you to know, for each of these industries, the government has developed its own import replacement plans. If you wish to get acquainted with the specific plans for specific goods, you may use the state information industrial system. You may come up to me and I will show you the website. Automotive industry is #1 on this list. If you go to this website, you may very easily access the decrees of the Ministry of Industry and Trade and find the plans for decreasing imports in these industries. As for the automotive, I can name only decree number 648 that was issued on the 31st of March 2015, and it deals with import replacement in automotive industry. It sets the desired indices for imports that the government wants to achieve by 2020. in Russia. For example, the import of gearboxes amounts now to 100%, which means that 100% of gearboxes are being imported to Russia. By 2020, this figure has to achieve 20-30%, meaning that the import will be decreased by 70 to 80%, or at least is expected to be decreased. If now we have 100% of imported goods, the Ministry of Industry and Trade does not see any prerequisites for some of the goods to be at least localized in Russia. For example, bridges, hydro pumps, steering wheel systems, etc. Since I've mentioned this state procurement being one of the main principles of restricting the commodities of foreign origin, it should be mentioned that two federal laws are being used now. Number 44, that regulates the procurement by governmental agencies, and the second federal law is number 223, that regulates the procurement of goods by various companies, including public companies and private public companies like Rosneft and Sberbank. Within the framework of federal law number 44, the government has a right to set up direct bans and restrictions, and this policy is being already implemented. I will show you later which decrees have been adopted. As for federal law number 223, the government has a right to set up the priority for the Russian goods, but with no direct restrictions. Though some of the companies like RZD, Gazprom have already initiated the import replacement policy for the goods they are purchasing. If you go to their website, you see practically on the first pages a list, quite big list of goods that they envisage to buy locally in Russia. So within the framework of federal law number 44, the government has adopted direct restrictions that are dealing with some of the products. For example, the goods for the defense purposes. And in each restriction, there are exceptions. For example, for the defense purposes, it is possible to have a foreign product if it is not being produced in Russia. For some of the goods, if they are not produced in the territory of the Eurasian community, meaning Russia, Belarus, Kazakhstan, Armenia. For some other goods, there are some restrictions, which means that, for example, for the software, the foreign product may be part of governmental procurement if it's analog or similar that is being produced in Russia, does not meet the requirements of the customers. There are other restrictions in terms of medical devices, medical drugs. As for automotive products, there are some bans already set up. If you want to get acquainted with it, this is decree number 656. It was issued in July 2015. There is a ban to purchase foreign special equipment, bulldozers, tractors, lifts, etc. Quite a big list of different equipment and vehicles, heavy vehicles. So the policy banning the goods of foreign production has already been started quite actively. In connection with such restrictions, there is a question how to confirm the status of locally produced goods so that these goods really meet the demands of state procurement. This is to deal with both the companies that have direct contracts, but also the companies of tier 2 suppliers, if in accordance with the legislation, their products have to be considered to be local. There's no universal mechanism of the confirmation of the goods status in Russia. In each decree by the Russian government, there is a separate document that has to confirm the status of one or other product, or the fact that this product has been produced in Russia. You see the list of these documents on this slide. The main here is the origin certificate that is being issued by the Chamber of Commerce within the framework of the CIS agreement dated 2014. But it may also be confirmed by expert assessment acts and requirements of the customers, as I've mentioned for the software. For some of the products, in particular in machine building and automotive industry, there are own criteria or obligatory technological operations and ad valorem share, or the minimal share of the foreign components used. This is an alternative to confirmation of the country of origin of goods, or the ST1 certificate. We are talking here about the decree number 719. Some of you may know it. For some goods, this decree sets up its own more loyal requirements in terms of fulfilling technological operations for the good to be recognized as the product produced in Russia. More loyal because they repeat the criteria of some obligatory operations that have been set up by the CIS agreement, but they also give a possibility of step-by-step deferral of these operations to a maximum of 3 years. If the product of the company is subject to this decree 719 and the company is ready to fulfill, or maybe already fulfills, these obligatory technological operations, it can confirm the status of its products by receiving from the Ministry of Industry and Trade the confirmation of the fact that the product was produced in Russia. And this confirmation is valid for 3 years. It is also important that there are no analogs or similar products produced in Russia. The company may receive the conclusion at the Ministry of Industry and Trade and import the products and take part in the governmental procurement on the basis of the Ministry of Industry and Trade confirmation that there are no similars to this product in Russia. And this confirmation is valid also for 3 years and is being issued by the Ministry of Industry and Trade. There is a new tool that I've mentioned, the special investment contract. And this tool may be the basis for the companies receiving this confirmation for the product being originated in Russia. The advantage of this special investment contract is that it provides a deferral of obligatory technological operations. Once again, decree number 719 is mainly to deal with the heavy machine building and automotive industry. A few words about this special investment contract for you to understand what it is all about. For the first time, this term was described in the federal law on the industrial policy of the Russian Federation that was adopted in December 2014. This is a contract that is being signed between an investor and the Russian Federation, either the Ministry of Industry and Trade or the subjects of the Russian Federation, or it may be a tripartite special investment contract as well. The term of this contract is limited to 10 years. It can't be signed for more than 10 years, and the investor takes an obligation to invest not less than 750 million rubles, either for the creation of some new production from scratch or modernization of the existing production. The investor receives, on the basis of this contract, tax preferences. The rate for profit tax may be decreased down to 0. Also, the investor receives the guarantees that the terms and conditions for the investor won't be changed. If after the signing of the special investment contract, new statutory acts are being adopted, they are not applicable to the investor. And also the investor may receive subsidies that exist in the regulatory basis as of now. The special investment contract is not a direct guarantee of receiving such subsidies, but there is quite a big number of draft laws that develop this institution. And this special investment contract provides the right for the company to be the only contractor in public procurement system. This contract also may guarantee some preferences in terms of getting subsidies. And here I speak about the draft laws I've mentioned already. And there are some other draft laws that envisage the governmental provision of a minimal scope that the investor wants to get in state procurement, which is very important for the companies. As of now, the special investment contracts are signed already. For example, in Perm region, first and foremost, because in some regions, special laws have been adopted, and the regional laws have changes in industrial policy connected with this special investment contracts. Among these regions, Perm, Ulyanovsk, and Chelyabinsk regions can be mentioned. In some other regions, they are being under development. One federal special investment contract has been signed as of today at the level of the Ministry of Industry and Trade. This took place at St. Petersburg Economic Forum with the company called Class, the company that manufactures agricultural equipment. More than 17 requests have been applied to the Ministry of Industry and Trade, including from automotive industry, Mazda, Hyundai, and Daimler. That's it on the whole, what I wanted to mention, and I will take any questions of yours during the Q&A session. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Again, another interesting presentation that gave us a little bit more information about what the government is doing to support the local Russian automotive industry and how the opportunities that are being offered to help exports in particular. So I think that was exactly what we wanted for the first session, to give us a better idea of what is happening in the industry and what the opportunities are for everybody. And they were honest, they included some of the challenges. I also need to say that we had some technical issues regarding the Wi-Fi in the whole hotel. So it was out of our control a little bit. So apologies to those in the room who couldn't connect to the Wi-Fi and to our live system, and also for those who are watching the live streaming who have only just been able to really see the live streaming. But this session has been recorded, so if you've missed the beginning of the session, later on it will be available to see the whole session later on. But now we're back onto the live stream. So hello everybody. Yeah. So now it's time for the questions. I think there was plenty of information that was shared there. So the rules are that if you have a question, please raise your hand, wait for the microphone, and then maybe if you can stand up and say your name and your company name, and then ask the question. And of course the question can be in English or in Russian, whatever you're more comfortable with. So perhaps I will ask the first question to both of the panelists really, which is, we're hearing particularly for obvious reasons in this forum about what's being done for the automotive industry. But I just wondered, in general terms, how important is the government seeing the automotive industry compared to other industries? Is the automotive really a number one target, or something that they really want to push and promote? Are there other industries that have a higher importance? So how important is the automotive industry to the Russian government?
I think I start with this one. Very interesting question. Thank you very much. Well, when we have a look on the structure of the Russian GDP, then the share of the automotive industry is very low and basically insignificant. But I always say that what Russian government did to the Russian automotive industry is definitely the best example of working with foreign investors. That was as good as only one industry where the strategy which was developed for the industry was really realized, and a lot of investors came to Russia with a huge number of OEMs coming to Russia, but also tier 1 suppliers and partly tier 2. Unfortunately, situation changed, and tier 2 and tier 3 suppliers are still not in Russia, which is disturbing further development of the industry, of the automotive production in Russia. And that's why we are talking about this problem with real localization, real local content of the vehicles produced in Russia.
Да, позвольте добавить,
Well, let me just add my 2 cents. I know that a lot of you participate in Adam Smith conferences and also in a number of other cross-industry platforms. We hear a lot from the public officials that the automotive industry is one of the key priorities for the government. It is included in the list of priority industries for import substitution, and it was of course clear for us that the Russian government will continue its efforts to support the automotive industry while supporting of course a number of other industries. What's interesting is that we see a bit of a difference when it comes to support of OEMs and support that is given to manufacturers of components. We do see that there were quite a lot of measures that were introduced to support automotive OEMs when it comes to local production of vehicles in Russia, and I'm talking about different subsidies and that are being allocated to R&D, to Euro 5, and so on and so forth. We see that a lot of subsidies are given for the loan interest rates and so on and so forth. But when we talk about automotive components, unfortunately, there are not so many support measures that were introduced by the government, maybe only a couple. We also do participate in a number of public fora and platforms, and we hear a lot of concerns that although these two things, the OEMs and components, are very closely related, while at the same time we see that the government emphasizes OEMs more than components. So I do hope that the strategies that the Ministry of Industry and Trade is developing up to 2025 for the automotive industry, I do hope that this strategy will set the tone and will basically lay down the general directions that would allow us to talk about the government's vision for the automotive industry. We expect that the strategy will be ready in the third quarter this year. Thank you.
Perhaps. What about supporting the logistics industry? DLA Piper, perhaps, at least for us, are particularly known for the customs business that you do. So are the government making it as easy as possible to support the logistics companies to do their business internationally, to support the export of vehicles, and to help them to win more international business?
Well, of course, when it comes to export, the issue of export is rather complex. It's been said many times that a lot of the companies view export as one of the ways that will help them survive the current economic slowdown. But when we talk about specific measures that are targeting exports support, well, we do not really see a lot of measures in this regard, but we see that we do not have any export tariffs when it comes to the customs. We do not export tariffs for vehicles or components. We do not have any extra tariff measures such as certification in the automotive industry. Furthermore, when it comes down to customs administration, basically, we're talking about 4 hours of customs clearance for exports, and a lot of that at the time we stick to these 4 hours. So the situation is such. Let me just add my 2 cents. There's quite an interesting situation that we're witnessing in the automotive industry. We see that the ministry is ready to initiate the dialogue with the OEMs and all of the stakeholders. I do believe that this is a rather unique situation for Russia. We see that all of the developments in the automotive industry, we see that a lot of things were achieved. And basically, when you come to the Russian ministries and to the government officials, you usually get what you're asking for, and you usually get preferences and maybe privileges. The fact that the Russian government agreed to compensate the costs up to the exporting to the border of the Russian Federation, it might not be a support measure, but I do believe this is a testament to the fact that they are trying to do things, but we have to keep in mind that there are a lot of the factors that we have to remember, the factors that I mentioned in my presentation.
The audience? Question at the front, please.
Vegarsinas from CDC International Logistics. I have a question for Tatiana. If your forecast holds true until 2020, you say there's almost a doubling of the cars produced in Russia. And that will also mean, I guess, roughly doubling of the international sourcing as well. where do you see Russian car makers would source from? Would it be from established channels, established countries, or would they be looking for new markets and new opportunities for international sourcing?
Okay, international sourcing, you mean imports, correct?
Yeah, car parts, material.
Car parts and material. Okay, it's a different question basically regarding imports of finished vehicles and imports of components. So according to our forecast, local sourcing of vehicles will stay on the level of 74-75%. Still very high share considering how many different models we have right now in the world and we will have in the future. Another one question about real sourcing, so where the spare parts might come from. We expect that the real sourcing will increase to about 60%, so 60% of all the components which are used for finished vehicles, for vehicles produced in Russia, will be also manufactured in Russia. The only one trouble what we see right now, this is tier 3 suppliers, which are not in Russia right now, and they have no stimulus right now to come to Russia. So that's why we are watching closely the situation with special investment contracts, which my colleague talked about. And well, right now we are not sure how the situation will be. We're sure that local sourcing, so finished vehicles, will be on the level of around 75%, and hope that the real content will reach about 60%. But this is a kind of question right now. Thank you.
And there's a question at the back.
My name is Flávio Batista from Wallenius Wilhelmsen. Question is for Tatiana. First of all, excellent presentation.
Thank you.
In 2008, the sales market for automobiles was around 3 million cars, of which 70% maybe imports, and now it dropped down to 1.4. And in 2026, you are anticipating to be back to 3 million cars. But I understand from your presentation, and you kind of answered part of the question, so it's going to be more local production, maybe 70%. So you don't see the import market coming back to those levels by 2025?
That's correct. That's correct. We do not expect that imports of vehicles will increase, and this is not what Russian government tends to do. With the Russian production, we also expect that premium vehicles will be manufactured in Russia, and example of Mercedes will be a kind of teaser for other manufacturers. So even considering premium market, we do not see that imports of vehicles will be more than 25%.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Yaroslav, customs representative from Alfa Usluga. So my question is to Tatiana. Do you believe that the decrease in car consumption from 3 million to a bit less than 1.5 million, do you believe that it is a decline to actually the real demand, not the demand which is inflated by bank loans, but actually this is the real demand, the demand that is sustainable in the country, that this is the level of demand that our consumers can actually sustain and use on the market. So the second question I have for you, Tatiana, your growth, your consumption growth strategy and your exports growth strategy, does it take into account the fact that production capacities in other countries which are the largest manufacturers of finished automotive goods, do you also know that the utilization rate of these production capacities is only up to 60 to 70%, so they have quite a significant growth potential, which more significant than the growth potential of manufacturing in Russia, especially because everything's already there, everything's already set up. Thank you very much for your questions. Let me start from the second question. Basically, what you mentioned, there was one of the ideas that I was talking about in my presentation, so maybe I didn't emphasize it enough, saying that, yeah, capacity is not 100% utilized in many countries, but it is true, but also the costs are a bit different, the costs are lower, the situation overall is more stable than in Russia. The logistics is more developed. Everything runs smoothly. This is absolutely true. So this is one of the factors that actually hinders the development of the Russian export. We do know from our own experience that a lot of the OEMs have carried out a number of studies and surveys. They were almost ready to export, but having compared to what they can do using traditional established capacities outside of Russia, well, they usually make a decision that export out of Russia at present does not or would not give them a significant advantage. And I do believe this is one of the reasons why the export is not increasing but decreasing. So your first question was whether the demand for cars is real or realistic. Well, we do not actually believe that the real demand is the demand that we're witnessing at present. We do see that a lot of private consumers, a lot of consumers who buy cars for personal use, we see that they either delayed buying a new car or they decided to wait with the purchase due to a decrease of their incomes. When it comes to corporate consumers, well, some of them did renew their fleet last year due to negative expectations or due to the negative outlook for the economy, but the majority of corporate clients did freeze their investments into the update of their corporate fleet. But so we do believe the situation will change a little bit in 2017. You mentioned subsidies, and you mentioned car loan markets. I believe that the car loan market in Russia is underdeveloped, especially compared to other established markets. I would say that the 50% of car loans in Western Europe or Russia is very, very far away from this sort of figure, even taking into account all of the subsidies that are extended by the governments. In our best years, I would say that the demand in Russia was about 2.5 million cars. So today, of course, the demand is much, much less. And on the one hand, this demand is due to car replacement. This is a so-called replacement demand. And on the other hand, these are new consumers which come onto the market. So in Russia, we believe that this component of new demand is much higher than in the developed countries such as Germany, France, North America. And we do believe that the market will continue to grow. The issue is whether the current recession, how long will the current recession be, and when we will have a rebound in the economy. But we do believe that the rebound will happen. Thank you very much. I do hope I answered your question.
Question at the front, please.
Good morning. Christopher Ludwig, Automotive Logistics. A question first for Ksenia, and I apologize because I definitely don't understand Russian customs and things, so certainly I get this wrong. But regarding the industrial agreements that car makers have had up to 2018-19 with localization requirements and minimum production requirements in exchange for reduction of import tariffs. It's my understanding that the localization rates required are being just delayed or possibly delayed. Do you have any insider information on what's happening in regard to those industrial agreements?
Thank you very much for your question. As far as if I understood you correctly, you're asking about industrial assembly and a lot of the agreements that were signed with the OEMs and manufacturers of automotive components. So you're right in saying that the decree has already been signed into power. This is a trilateral decree between the Ministry of Finance, the Ministry of Trade and Industry, and so on. So basically, it states that the first stage of localization, which finished in 2014, well, basically it was extended till 2015. What it means in practice is that the minimum local content level or localization level that was set for the first stage was not very high, but it will be extended to 2015. It will include 2015. So right now, this decree is going through the Ministry of Justice of the Russian Federation. We do believe it will be signed into effect in the next couple of days, and those companies which did not comply to these local content requirements in 2015, and a lot of companies witnessed an increase from 15, let's say, to 45%. These companies will get another year under their signed contracts and another year for the import tariffs.
This one to Tatiana. You show, I mean, relatively optimistic growth for exports, it still seems to me, 350,000 perhaps over the next 10, 15 years. When you see the kind of import restrictions and complex regulations here in Russia, does it put a damper on any of your expectations? Because, you know, a lot of export trade is dependent somewhat on good relations in trade agreements and things like that. So are you kind of expecting some improvement in the geopolitical situations to allow some of these exports to actually grow at the levels that you expect?
Good question. So basically we consider in our exporting numbers geopolitical situation, and according to our expectations, well, this is also related to sanctions. Geopolitical situation will improve starting in the second half of 2017, when sanctions will be slowly abolished, and somewhere in 2018 we expect to see no, at least European sanctions. It is highly possible that American part of the sanctions will be prolonged for a couple of more years. But in our, at least vehicle exports, we do not see any significant potential for exports to North American countries. That's why improvement of relations with West European countries we also consider, but I also showed you only like couple of thousand vehicle exports in our base scenario to European countries. In the optimistic scenario, a little bit more, but still not enough to really consider West European countries as key export markets. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I think we've reached and perhaps overrun a little bit of time. But that's because of the late start and the technical problems. But I'd like to thank our panel for giving us a very interesting start to the conference. Thank you very much. We'll be restarting again at 11 o'clock for the, is it 11? Yeah, 11 o'clock for the next session, which is about looking at some of the opportunities and solutions that car makers and logistics companies are working on. So please enjoy your coffee break, visit the sponsor stands, and we'll see you back in the room at 11 o'clock. Thank you.